Hey everyone, this is Tom Savantry. Thanks for joining me on the Perennial Pride podcast. And I'm so excited. I have my very first guest. I'm honored to have Gary Pinkerton with me today. And, he's been someone I've known for a number of years and really has helped me in my sort of financial practice and even just in life. He's been a mentor of mine, friend. I'm just so honored. You're going to get tons of valuable information from him. He's just a plethora of knowledge and experience, and so happy to have you, Gary.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Coming to everybody from Sarasota, Florida, loving life. Just got back from an amazing real estate investor conference and headed to an awesome conference with you, my friend, summits on all things life insurance and growing wealth. So it's really cool to be back around some good friends in person. Just can't wait to do it, and am honored to be the first guest on your podcast, and hope that I could live up to that challenge you just gave us.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm looking forward to too. I think as you've emphasized to me many a times, I mean, being around the right people is so key to life in general. And I'm so excited to kind of regroup with you guys this coming week at the conference. So today really is to, I was mentioned to you before we started recording, I think of you in a lot of ways, all positive, but the one that jumped out to me is the word freedom. And, for
Yeah.
what you stand for, and certainly Gary, you have an interesting past. I want you to share that with the audience, but it just something to me just rings true. And I think it's the epitome of who you are. So Gary, tell my listeners a little bit more about you and your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm 53 years old. I grew up in Illinois on a dairy farm, very southern end of Illinois. And so this was the 70s, early 80s. And so I was a teenager in the early, 82, 83. And Jimmy Carter had just been replaced by Ronald Reagan. And Paul Volcker comes in as Fed chair. And Reagan and Volcker get together and decide they're going to break the back of inflation. It's like we're reliving this right now today. And so they had the courage, after trying several other things. There's a great saying out there by some British guy who said, actually, it was Winston Churchill, actually, not just some British guy, but he said, we love the Americans because you can always count on them to do the right thing once they've tried everything else. And so at this point in the early 80s, Paul Volcker and Ronald Reagan said, we actually have the fortitude to do what's necessary to stop inflation. And so they took interest rates to 21%. And I think it was like the beginning of 1984, hit 21% peak interest rates on loans. And well, the sad news was that we had variable interest rate loans on our farm at the time. And so we ended up losing the farm and living on a trailer on my uncle's land. And by this point, my dad's health was failing. He passed a few years later, and I was trying to run businesses to put food on the table. So we had all kinds of woodworking things and trucking business, which whatever we could do. And so kind of got that stabilized, and my mom's, her career and everything was in pretty good shape. And so like there was an opportunity to go to college, and really my big goal in life was to get a safe, secure job and make that job be as far away from Illinois as possible. So I found the Naval Academy. It had exactly the price I was looking for college, which was zero. And that's about what I could afford. And so I went to the Naval Academy. Somewhere along the way there, I got really inspired about patriotism. And over the years, I've really become a big believer in the freedoms that we have in America and what, our Constitution in this country stands for. I spent 30 years in nuclear submarines, had the wonderful opportunity and experience to command 165 people on the USS Tucson in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, an amazing deployment to Asia. And I was on 4 total ships, but that one was obviously the closest to my home. When I finished up there, I went to the Pentagon and the Naval Academy and spent about 5 or 6 years in the Washington, D.C., Annapolis area. And I learned a lot more about big government. And I was starkly different than what I had experienced going up through the ranks in the Navy. In the Navy, it's all about protecting freedom for Americans. It's about doing our job, achieving the mission, coming back, having completed what they told us to do. Yet in the Pentagon and even in Annapolis, like it was all big government stuff. How do we get our budget to be bigger than last year? How do we hire more people? It was just all the lethargy, all the swamp kind of stuff that, Trump came in and said, I'm going to drain, right? And a lot of people have said that. He didn't achieve it any much more than everybody else. Yet everyone can kind of recognize what I was experiencing when I was there as well.
Yeah, and you hear always. It's funny. I was talking to my mother the other day, and she was talking about her history back in Thailand and the red tape that came with government and sort of society. it sounds like that's what you kind of experience as you kind of get into the Pentagon world and
Yeah.
the government, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And so I use the word agency nowadays. Our mutual dear friend and our coach, Tammy Brannon with Instinctive Life. I mean, she has helped me pull out words that are more and more accurate every time you talk. And so she said, you know what you say all the time is really agency. It's not just freedom. And agency is a word we don't use a lot nowadays, but it is the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own financial free decisions. And so, how do you get freedom in this world? Well, they really need a couple things. Like you need enough resources to do what you wanted to do, right? Like if you want to put food on the table, you want to take a vacation, or you want to quit work at 60, or, all those things, like you need a resource to do it, or you need somebody else to pay for it for you, right? And there's no guarantee the other person's ever going to pay for it for you, like Social Security or something like that, or your parents or whatever, right?
Right.
And so if you really want to guarantee it's going to happen and feel free that you can control that, then you need that resource. So you need a resource. And then really you need no one blackmailing you, right? I call it financial blackmail, but no one can tell you that's a wonderful dream of yours. However, here's what really is going to happen because I'm actually the one controlling it, right? And it really goes back to the same thing. Like the reason people have financial blackmail over us can't move, can't go to your kids, baseball game, whatever it is, because you don't have the ability to say no, right? And it's typically financial ability. So I want to help everybody that I can who are like-minded set up their lives such that they have that agency.
Right. And that's where we share common ground in the sense that, my world is I'm not trying to take anyone's finances over. Trying to empower them so they can grab that agency for themselves, right? And fulfill
Right.
whatever it is they want in their own sort of worlds. And, that's just much more exciting instead of, passing the buck and letting someone else sort of control it for us, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the financial advice you see is sort of set up for that. And it can easily be something we relent to or people relent to. And then to your point, have no control. So, how did you migrate from the Naval Academy to kind of what you do today?
Well, there were a few years where I was just stumbling along, getting the qualifications completed in the Navy, learning my craft. And then just, the thing about the military is that, think of like, the average starting age for a commanding officer of a nuclear submarine or a surface ship or a squadron of aircraft is 38 years old, right? So it's really pretty young if you think like that's the CEO of that organization. So you're young, and that results in really what is a very fast moving train from the day you graduate college. The moment that you certify or qualify on some entry level kind of a job, you immediately get thrown the qualification requirements for the next one. And it's just that nonsense. So it is, really fast paced, and you learn a ton and you experience a lot all over the world. And what I kept finding was that every place I went in this planet, even though they were unique and interesting, none of them had the freedoms and the American dream kind of stuff that we have here, right? So you couldn't go to another country and immigrate there and just, guarantee that your success would be related directly to how hard you worked, right? I don't know of any other place that's like that. So there are some that are similar and modeled like that, but the rule of law that we have in America and the rules, or I guess the laws that we have. So when I said the rule of law, I meant like the judicial system that will back up rule of law, but just even the wording of the laws are unique in this country, and they enable people to reach the stars. It really is how hard you want to work and what you want those dreams to be. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. And as screwed up as our country has gotten in the last few years, that is still true. And again, it comes back to just the way in which our founding fathers put it all together, in the Constitution when we started.
Yeah, and it's upsetting. I know this is something that, I've heard you talk often enough about. And to your point about the agency, that a lot of what has happened our country is sort of encouraging people to not take agency over their lives, right?
Yeah,
Because they're going to rely on maybe someone else to assist them, and they put them in sort of this little prison area, right? That they're going to, just follow along versus what this country's been built on is to have that freedom to pave your own path and create so much value that, money's just going to flow to you because you're creating so much more value for this world. And, unfortunately, I guess our society will be the unfortunate sort of recipient of maybe less than it could be because of it. Because
sure.
people are not reaching their full potentials or reaching for the stars, like you say. And, it's certainly not the country that, how we started with. Right.
Yeah, it's not, but it's still the prettiest dirty shirt and the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. And and I think we are a long ways from everything being lost. There's been a recent, after the horrific Uvalde, Texas shooting incident in the elementary school, there's been a lot of talk about, the Second Amendment. And, I don't want to really talk about whether it's perfect or not. I don't think it's perfect, but it is really one of the few places where, we have that, and it's been strong for 250 years. And there haven't even really been any major inroads into changing, getting a situation where freedom goes away, or there's not even a path for freedom to go away in America right now yet. So I think, I'm very bullish on America, I guess is what I would say. And again, one of the main reasons is that agency is super important. And the only way you can ensure agency is have control, right? You got to have control over your own life and your own future, and feel like you can make the decisions that, again, allow you to, so that's control, right? You be able, knowing that if you make a decision, you can play that thing out. Maybe not perfectly,
Yep.
but you can control the direction that your car of life is driving. And so I help clients, and you help clients every day look at their financial decisions through a lens of control. Do I have more or less control when I do this? As a very quick example, something that's super popular out there is called like velocity banking, or, where you basically use a home equity line of credit, and you take your paychecks and you use it to pay down this line of credit, which used to be a fixed rate, mortgage, and then borrow against it. Right. And people get super focused on like the interest rates of these loans. And maybe this is all by the wayside now with rising interest rates, but a couple of years ago, it was all the rage. And I would ask people, like, tomorrow morning when you wake up, are you guaranteed that you still have that money that you just put in there from your paycheck? Like, do you have the money that you can go pay for your groceries with? And they say, well, of course. I'm like, well, okay, so go call your banker and say, is there a guarantee? Can you show me the paperwork where there's a guarantee that I have access to this line of credit tomorrow? And so what they would figure out is that they don't have that. Like, the banker has all the control in that situation. And so the way you and I do mortgages, and the way we talk to our clients, is lock in a promise, a legal contract from the US government, or backed by the US government, from a bank that says you can have this at this fixed rate for the rest of your life. And so when you
Right.
pull that money out and you put it in your savings account or your life insurance policy or somewhere, it's yours, right? You have control. So many people have knowledge. They have today a situation that will work in their favor, but tomorrow the situation changes. And when you go back to the root cause of that, it's because they don't have control over what it looks like tomorrow.
And what do you think most people, when you step back from the typical person you come across, who maybe they'll stand up and say, well, it's this finance stuff's just too complicated, right? I can't do it, right? I have to rely on someone else to kind of tell me what I'm supposed to do. It's just too complicated. I mean, why do you think that has sort of, now sort of pervaded our entire economy? It feels like that. I hear that more often than not.
Well, there's a
What
couple of
if,
things. I mean, one, it's a tremendous success of marketing, right? Like, let's say that, a dieting health food company decides that they want to market and tell you, listen, outsource your personal health to us, outsource your fitness and health to us. Just send your money to us every month and we'll take care of you. You will be all set. Right. Like, if they could sell that and convince people of that, who would not want to do that? Like, I don't like working out. I don't like having to eat what I want to, what people tell me to eat. So if I could outsource that, I would totally do it. Sometimes okay, newsflash, sometimes I screw up my relationship with my wife, right? Well, if I could outsource that, why not do that? Right. But of course you can't. But we have been convinced through, way back in the day, gosh, I'm forgetting the guy's name now, but A.L. Williams, and buy term insurance and invest the difference. And then Wall Street and all of the financial entertainers on television, right? That you just, send off dollar cost average, put your money into these mutual funds, and balanced basket of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, I think is how the little jingle goes, right? And then you send off your money to these people. And then when you turn 65, like, it all will have magically worked out. For some reason, we think that works for finances, but it doesn't work. So I guess, to answer your question, then, the reason that we have abdicated that responsibility is because we've been convinced that we can't, right? But I hopefully have convinced you that it is absurd to say that your relationship with your wife, or your health, or your relationship with God, or any of the other major things in life, that if we want them to be successful, we have to take care of, we have to kind of remain in control of them. Hopefully that seems ludicrous. And now the idea of handing our money off to some other guy that supposedly is going to pay as much attention to it as we would, like, that does not make sense. It shouldn't make sense. But we've been sold that, and a lot of people bought it in the middle class. That's the key part, in the middle class. The people that are generationally wealthy or people that are in kind of the lower class trying to get to the middle class, they have not bought into that same thing.
Right. And from that side of it is for people who are, which that's what our sort of advice probably gravitates towards, to these types of people who are open-minded, want more, right? Recognize they may not know it, but they're going to learn it and they're going to take responsibility to do it, right? And they'll leverage resources and experts and advisors, but ultimately it's their decision and their path, right?
Right.
And those
Absolutely.
types of people, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of it. And so for you, when when as you were kind of developing your own sort of financial philosophy and mindsets around things, could you recall times as some of the key points where you kind of said that you had these epiphanies, like, and realizations that, hey, something's not right here. And what do I do to, find out how to do this better?
Sure. Yeah. So I always had this kind of sneaking feeling that there was something wrong as I would go from duty station to duty station with my Wall Street financial advisor, a group that specialized in working with the military. Wonderful people. At one point, though, I had this moment I'll never forget where I'm actually, when I was going to command a nuclear submarine, right? 165 people under my care, show up to my new advisor, and this guy's like 25. And he's telling me all these things that I should invest in. And I've just been through a commanding officer course where they test you nonstop for like 3 weeks, go to 3 or 4 different submarines, people you've never met. And you're like trying to figure out, do I trust this person? Like, where does their credibility come from? What's their track record? Right. And so I'm playing the same game with this young man. And I'm thinking, in the world would I listen to this young man? Right. And so I just had this uneasiness. And then this was like 2009 or 8, maybe. Then everything kind of falls apart. And I realized while I'm commanding my submarine in the Pacific and paying no attention to this massive Great Recession, we call it now, by the time I left command in 2011, my finances had been destroyed and thankfully had kind of just wandered their way a little bit back, but nowhere near like back to where I was. For most Americans, it took 10 years to get back to where you were in 2008. And so I knew that didn't make any sense. And I was seeking control, even though I didn't have Patrick Donahue at Paradigm Life, his hierarchy of wealth kind of pyramid to talk about. I was trying to pull things down that pyramid from high risk to high control and low risk. Right. And so I wanted to put everything in real estate. And I really at the time couldn't explain why I wanted to make that shift. I probably would have answered cash flow. I want the cash flow. But today, what I would answer is, after going through a lot of help with coaches and mentors, is that really what I was doing is trying to prevent the 1970s from happening again. And I saw quantitative easing coming in 2013, 14, 15, and it really had me quite nervous. I thought high inflation was coming back then, not now. And so I was trying to prevent what's happening today. And thankfully it didn't happen back then because it allowed me to get more properties and get a little smarter. But I can tell you that at the end of last year, when it was clear to me it was coming this time, because instead of printing money and giving it to the big banks to bail them out, this time in COVID, we printed money and put it in the hands of people in checking accounts, right? And that caused immediate inflation everywhere. So that's actually what I thought was going to happen in 2013. So I was making the transitions back then, and the timing looked like it was horrible, like I was 10 years early or whatever. But I was able to refinance out at the end of last year to kind of lock in some more, reset everything to another 30 years and pull equity, get it back into my control. And so from that perspective, it's really good. I'm building 5 new construction properties right now. I'm not think my timing's too good on those, but we'll see. Maybe I'll give back all the smartness I had last year, or timing, I guess, that I had last year. So for me, it was about moving money from low control, high risk down to a point of other assets like real estate and personal businesses and things where I had more control. Because in the end, what I really want to get across to your audience is that there is no pile of money. There is no 401k. Hopefully this isn't bad news. Kind of starts off that way, but there is no pile of money or 401k or brokerage account, regardless of its size, that will ever actually keep you safe. You cannot outsource your safety to this pile of money like Richie Rich, right? We used to go look in the safe, right? And see the pile of gold. Like, somebody can just take it, right? That happened to my father-in-law. You meet the wrong person, you make the wrong decision, that money's gone. Now the amazing asset you had in your life that created all of that, yourself, that thing's been taken out of service. It's been sent out to pasture. That horse does not know how to win races anymore, right? So in the end, the only thing that keeps us safe is ourselves. And I'm not saying that if you're a roofer, you got to be up on the roof at 95 years old. But what I'm saying is that you have to be able to add value to the world and produce in some manner, add more value than you take, right? This whole idea of transitioning to taking value at 65 and never adding value anymore, that's not a safe way, because no pile of money is going to keep you safe in that environment.
Yeah, and that's, and I know you said it a number of times, is that, the number one asset, and it's something that I personally have grown to really appreciate more and more each day around keeping myself healthy, keeping, investing in myself and personal development and all those sorts of things because right, we're our number one assets and we're the one we can rely on for sure, right? In terms of our effort, our attitudes around life and what we can produce. It's something that, can get lost in the mix when you're just pushing money into an account like a 401k to use 20 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing to invest in yourself today? So, it's interesting around too, when you mentioned, trying to, basically shore up maybe the foundation of your life financially, right? And that's what you're helping to do with a lot of your clients. And same with me. Talk to me a little about because we always hear that thing. Like it's you have to take high risk for high reward, right? That's the kind of mantra. These sorts of mantras that just stick in people's heads. And so, talk to me more about that because and I think I share a little different lens of that and how people can think about investing in a way that actually doesn't require that as much of risk as people think you have to.
Yeah. So I think it's true that if you want a massive return, you do have to take high risk. A massive return over a short period of time, you do have to take high risk. But the opposite is what we've been telling everybody. And it's a subtle change, but it's really important. And that is if you want massive high return, then take risk. Right. So we just made a causation right there. Right. And you can't make that causation. And that's the big mistake we've made. Right. So if you want to win the lottery, you gotta buy a ticket, which most likely will be a complete waste of money, right?
Yeah.
Right. But you can't say if you want to win the lottery, just buy a ticket, right? That causation right there and flipping it on its head is what has caught up so many Americans. Just take more risk. Hey, listen, my account, you know, just went down. My account value, this mountain of money that was going to protect me, just went down in this most recent correction. I'm now behind where I need to be and retire in 5 years. Well, then just take more risk. Okay, so let's say we were driving from California to New York on a motorcycle and we broke down and had to replace the tire. And now we're like 6 hours late. All right. Does going faster give us likelihood of higher gain? No, it's actually likelihood of more risk, right? So, like, if you go back to before the 1970s, maybe 1980s, Webster's dictionary did not have two definitions of risk, right? So it does now. It says what we think it is, like the likelihood of loss or the likelihood of bad things happening, right? But then the second one, it says in financial markets, it's often understood to be the potential for greater return, right? So, I mean, that's just marketing stuffed into the Webster's dictionary. So, I mean, I don't know if that really helped, but I think that's in our lingo because we want it to be true, but we don't have much evidence of it being true.
Yeah, and it also goes into the idea that sort of, and you mentioned the pyramid and your part of life around the risk and control factor, right? That's the other part that I appreciate more too. That obviously it takes a little more energy, learning, sort of more proactive sort of measures to learn something in terms of an investment. But hopefully, the more you know, the more experience you gain, the less risk you can take. I mean, it will put on your investment. And I think that's what a lot of folks that I run into don't even know what they're investing in. So for them, it's like, to me, it's such high risk. They don't even understand what they're in and why. It's just something that becomes an automatic thing. And to me, that's the riskiest thing you could do with your money. I said, might as well throw it into the lottery in that respect. I said, well, why don't you spend some time learning it before you go invest? And
Yeah.
you're going
And
to manage your risk.
exactly. Those are awesome points. And if you think about it, we do things exactly opposite in putting our money in the markets that we do with everything else in life. Like if you're going to go buy a car and you read in the newspaper or you happen to go buy the lot and it's at its highest possible price and has been going up rapidly, is that the moment to go buy that car? Right? So we buy when things are on sale. But in the markets, we get out and are crying in our spilt milk when things are at a low valuation. Instead of buying in, we sell out of what we did before and say, well, that didn't work. Right. And then we wait till something else is burning hot at its highest price and buy into that. Right. That's just really crazy. But again, we've been conditioned. That's a good idea. And it's kind of a mess. I'm kind of curious, like you meet with more, I'll say people who participate as high earning W-2 employees or executives, right? You meet with more just because of, your position at Pfizer, and curious on the Perennial Pride podcast, like what kinds of that are you going to look into? And is that kind of a bigger part of the conversations?
Well, yeah, it is a bigger part of it too, because I But I often want to and realize that, even through myself personally, a lot of the typical advice that I used to follow, you get so ingrained in your brain, like it's almost hard to shake sometimes. And,
Yeah.
and it took me a while when some of the concepts around infinite banking and all these sorts of unique strategies and approaches, they take time to really, grab and get connected. So a lot of it's, which I want to do with this podcast, is to introduce these concepts that you and I know and have experienced directly, but they may be so unusual for people. And sometimes it takes them a while for it to stick.
Yeah.
And so more exposure to it. So I can appreciate where people come from because I was there. And so I don't expect everyone to say, hey, this is the end all be all, and you got to adopt it immediately or you're stupid. Well, that's just silly. I mean, I came from that world and it took me a while to adopt some of these things. So I want to at least share them, folks like you and others that have experienced these, and that they're going to discover these things along the way themselves and see which ones fit, just like I did. And so I'm really eager to at least expose it. So for the people who really want it and want more and have that desire to stay open minded and grow, we give them the tools and resources to do it, and then they'll go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so like some basic financial concepts and then talking around that with guests and also maybe introducing the tools. It sounds like kind of at least the first few podcasts is a focus.
Yeah, and this is why it was entry point for you, like to share because, obviously you didn't grow up in the financial space, neither did I. And so we've grown and learned these things on the fly through our own personal experience around it and shaped it in a way that fits us and what we believe in. And we're now just trying to educate people. And without ever saying that this is the only way, we know it's not. But I know it's a pretty good one for the right people with the right mindsets and the right desires for their lives, right? Around freedom and control, and certainly, generational wealth and legacy planning and impact, right? We all share those things. And so hopefully this podcast will share more of those things. So at least open set of new opportunities for people that just you wouldn't see normally in a 401k or a company benefit plan. These are things that are visible today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important that everybody just understand, I would recommend, maybe put in the show notes, Patrick Donahue's book, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, that in chapter 7 has that hierarchy of wealth. And it's a really good and fresh concept, a fresh way to have a perspective about your money and how to build a sustainable family wealth plan. And it does not look like what we've been told by our Wall Street advisors for so many years. There's an area between directly owning assets like businesses and real estate and then having your money in kind of the stocks and bonds. And that is where you're completely removed from control. But in the middle there's this other thing called syndication, right? And oil and gas and things like that, that is new horizon for probably 99% of the people who are listening to the podcast. But it can be a great place, a bridge between maximum control and no control. And so I think that would be amazing for your audience to see that part.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I'll definitely put that in the show notes for sure. And, back to the foundational piece, though, to your point, you're building a house, right? That's where you start. You build a
Yeah.
foundation, right? Without that, things can crumble down very quickly.
Right.
And so, tell me more about like what is the foundation for you, your family, and your clients that you're supporting and helping with now? Like, what's that look like?
Sure. So that's a point of maximum control, right? That's where you're looking for absolute guarantees. If something doesn't give you a guarantee that it will do what it's said to do, or that it says it will do, excuse me, then it doesn't belong in the foundation. It's an investment, because investment, in my very simplified opinion, is that it's putting my money at risk for the potential of loss, but the opportunity of gain, right? So send my little dollars, my soldiers off to war to come back with the spoils of war, which is interest rate returns. But I could lose them out there, right? So if it's in the foundation piece, then it is 100% guaranteed not to be lost. It's the safe zone for your money and for all of your important assets. And so that's why we have insurance on things that are important, like our house and vehicles and our own human body, right? Because the number one asset, also losing that thing, is expensive for the family. And so it's got all the insurances and protection side, but then it's also got the savings, right? And so it's just simply, where do you save? And in any environment, any interest rate, but it certainly has people's attention today. I just talked to a client this morning and he said, Gary, we've been talking about this for 2 years. I think it's obvious now in the current interest rate, it's got my attention. I'm actually going to take action. right? There are people who might say the opposite. They might say, well, gosh, the interest rates on loans and inflation is higher than the policy returns of 5%. That's true. But it's a whole lot higher than the returns of 0%, in a savings account or in a safe in your house. So these are not intended to be investments. They're foundational. And again, they're 100% guaranteed. So I help clients like you do, everyone in our industry, that is like-minded, help people put their money in whole life insurance because it is 100% guaranteed. And, universal life insurance is interesting, but it has a risk of losing your money. And therefore it's not foundational. It can't serve this purpose.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's quite amazing, as to your point, the marketing engines of financial industries have sort of taken hold of the masses and to say this is the worst place to put your dollars. And,
Mm.
would I say that you put every last dollar into it? No. But, until you sort of start understanding what it is and the truth and facts of it, it unfortunately for many, it has this taboo sort of opinion on it. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not getting to benefit from it as much as they could.
Yeah, and I would just recommend to your audience, think about who are they listening to, right? So they need to listen to people who are in a position that they want to get to. So if the goal is, hey, my next door neighbor worked for 60 years and 50 years in something they didn't enjoy. They have this 401k and they're on fixed income and they're doing okay. They're taking a couple trips a year now and every few years they buy a car. If that is what you want, then listen to that person. But if you see somebody in their 30s or 40s jet setting around, and I'm not saying being ultra wealthy or becoming Grant Cardone is really the ultimate goal, but if you want to emulate somebody who has done this a little bit earlier in their lives and have a lot more control, or not every day waking up hoping the stock market hasn't ruined their future, then you have to listen to different people. And I can promise you that just about everybody who's doing whole life insurance, infinite banking, and following direct control with their assets and obtaining agency, they're doing it this way, not with things like universal life insurance and the stock market.
Right. Right. And the other side thing with this, and I want to maybe shift gears a little bit, is back to their own businesses, right? They recognize that this country is built on people building and being entrepreneurial and creating value in their own unique ways, through business, right? Whatever it is that it. So nowadays there's still the mantra: get a job and go to school, get a job, and stay at your job for maybe not that long, but flip around a little bit. You're still at a job, so for you, you're probably dealing with a lot more entrepreneurs, business owners, tell me a little bit more about kind of what you learned in working with people like that. And maybe that would help people who are maybe thinking about it, like, that it's possible, right? And what maybe steps they could take initially to kind of get going on that.
Yeah, a lot of people just find themselves unemployed and an entrepreneur all of a sudden, or a business owner. They don't necessarily walk into it, directly. My son's going to school to become an entrepreneur and do it. And he really doesn't have to go to school for that, but that is what his focus is. And so my reason of pointing that out is that he's planning right out of college to never have a W-2 job with somebody else. Majority of the people though end up like taking over the family business or starting a business when they couldn't get a job, or maybe a family member is disabled, so they have to take care of them. So they have to do a job. So they just find themselves there. And I don't think there's anyone that I've met who is a successful entrepreneur that would not tell you that they had a tough time. Right. But so, I don't remember who it was. He said, yeah, you're right. I was an overnight success, but that 40 years was a really long time. Right. So so some of the things I've learned is that it's challenging, but to be successful, you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself. You have to believe that you can work your way through this, regardless of what comes around the corner. Those are the people who are successful. They just know, listen, I really hope that it's not like another COVID thing around the corner up here that knocks me down 7 times. But if it does, I know for sure I will get up 8. So, whatever it takes, they will do it. That's the common thread of people who are business owners, entrepreneurs. And a lot of what drives them, I mean, they have a burning desire inside. And a lot of times it's like a chip on the shoulder that they were poor when they were young. That was me. Like, I just want to not be that way anymore. And I don't want my kids to be that way. And I want them to have financial education, right? And shortcut what I did. I think most parents are that way. And some other times is that, somebody had a bad experience at work and they don't ever want to go back to working for somebody else. So it's across the board on why they're doing it. But their characteristics and the commonalities is that they have enough confidence in themselves that they don't seek that security. You and I both spent a lot of time as W-2 employees, and delayed our time in leaving that W-2 employment because it was comfortable, right? It was like this warm blanket. And we're like, I don't know if I really want to throw this off and step out into the tundra. And so it is kind of almost puts you to sleep, and it's hard. So it's harder for us, I think, than somebody. I mean, listen, if somebody loses their job or if they can't go back to work or something, then they have to figure it out. Like they don't have to worry about the motivation to get there. My
Mhm.
kids, it's harder for them to become wealthy or successful business wise than it was for me, because I wasn't going to eat and I was going to be embarrassed every time I went somewhere. Right. So when you're poor, it's a lot easier. And so I think the same thing, like if you don't have a job. So for people who are in your position, my position, it's harder. It's a lot harder to step away from having a very comfortable warm blanket and step out in there into the crazy wild west.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And certainly you know enough about me. It took a lot longer than I ever imagined. And so I can appreciate it. And I sometimes think about it because my wife's in education and, they still press upon children to, get, with the greatest grades, where it's just nothing wrong with this, but it's about succeeding and not being okay with failure, even though they might say it. And we breed that in our corporate worlds, right? People who are typically are getting fired are the ones who make mistakes, right? They may try stuff new. Well, from the entrepreneurial side, that's almost mandatory. You're going to
Yeah,
have to fail a bunch, probably experience and be okay with it and recognize it's part of the journey and you got to get comfortable with it. And that's a tricky one. So I know from listeners who maybe are coming from corporate world, I mean, this is where you kind of put some feelers out there of other areas of business, maybe to try, right? To experiment with it and allow yourself to be okay with failure and recognize it's kind of part of the process. And, you kind of, once you experience it, you probably get hardened to it and can hopefully deal with it easier. It's still something that I grow stronger each day with it, but it still can be uncomfortable occasionally. But at least I know
absolutely.
I'm going the
Yep.
right direction with it. And for me personally,
Yeah.
it's for you mentioned your kids, like a lot of it to me is just to show my kids that it's possible, right? Even in your own family, that you can do it if you want to try it, but you got to work your ass off probably to do it. Or these are other routes, right? But at least you give them a path that is possible. So that's certainly to your point about the motivation, why it drives me too. So anyway,
Yeah.
so 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 your business now, I mean, it's evolving, and to me, always curious to hear as you're driving your business, kind of where do you see things going in the not so distant future? I mean, obviously, we have a lot of complexity and certain uncertainty going on in this world
Yeah.
economically. Kind of how are you seeing your business in practice and the financial space in general?
Well, I continue to grow. I work hard. I'm one of those believers that life is just this bowling ball on the top of a hill, and you're either going forward every day or going backwards every moment, really. And so I'm trying to continue to learn and evolve. But as that happens, my business and personal focus shifts, and then I just go attract people that are just like because it helps me. They can be my mentor. I can learn something from them. But clearly, I'm on that path and making these decisions about. Like right now, I'm focusing on starting small businesses like franchises. And the reason I want to do that is to teach my kids about systems and all the stuff that the Navy taught me. Franchises have those same kinds of things. Like I don't have a clue how to market a business, but the franchise does. Right. And so I'm not saying it's Pollyannish and that it's perfect, but that's where my current focus is because of my desire to help my kids do that. And now I just happen to be attracting a bunch of business owners because I'm going to those kinds of events. Right. So I mean, clearly what we do about building a foundational layer is applicable across the spectrum. And so as I move and change my focus, I can evolve and learn additional things. I'm attracting people from those new locations. So a lot of my clients are real estate investors and business owners now and pushing more and more towards business owners every time. Where do I think the economy is going? I personally believe right now, after spending 10 days with some really smart brains at the Real Estate Guys Summit in Belize, I'm confident that we are in a recession already. Like Danielle DiMartino Booth said that it started at the end of December. And so whether it was December of 21 or February of 22, 18 months into this thing, as it always happens, they're going to look back and have enough data to be able to say, right there is where it started. And I'm telling you, it started somewhere around January of this year. And what does that mean and how long will it last? Personally, I think we're going to attack interest rates hard until we get through or inflation. Sorry, we're going to attack inflation hard until we get through the upcoming election in November. Then we're going to completely retrace back to 0% interest rates and quantitative easing. And that's going to, make things worse again, but it's where we're going to need to go because we don't have the capacity in America to service our debt with 5, 6, 7% interest rate loans. So we will go there in a short period of time to try to stop the bloodbath for the Democrat Party. But as soon as that need is over, I believe we retrench all the way back to what it looked like at the beginning of 21. Stock market will scream up, I'm guessing, and people will be refinancing mortgages and all that kind of stuff. So that's my guess of what's going to happen.
Yeah, and this, I know we've been in such a long run up with since like 2009 and all the quantitative easing, all this stuff. It just, this sounds like another cycle of a lot of yo-yoing and a lot of volatility. And so again, this is where, we can step backwards a bit and say, what do we have that's solid and strong that doesn't break down so we can withstand these sorts of things? Because I tend to agree with you on a lot of that assessment, but there's a lot of things that the crystal ball is not is clear at this stage.
No, definitely not. And I think that we'll still be in recession next year. I think it's going to last 1 to 2 years. But there will be good things happening. A lot of new businesses and a lot of amazing wealth is created in recession. So, crisis and opportunity, opposite sides of the same coin, right? And so that will be true again. Ken McElroy mentioned that he made 90% of his wealth during the recession, the Great Recession, right? Because it created opportunities that are not there today. So they will always be there. We just have to be smart enough and well enough connected to understand when they come our way.
Well, on that note, Gary, this is as I suspected. I mean, just like tons of unbelievable insights from you. I appreciate it. You're a gentleman and a historian and a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much of sharing your thoughts with my listeners here. And, and for folks, Gary has a tremendous podcast, Gary's Gulch. You should definitely go out there and I'll put in the show notes and go listen. He's got tremendous guests. He'll just amaze you with the information he has in his brain of his, and he'll show you a different side to what you might not hear in the mainstream media, but he's telling the truth. So I would encourage you to go listen to him.
Done.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere else they can reach out? Is that probably the best place, Gary?
Yeah, the podcast or just Gary at GaryPinkerton.com can go there too. And you'll see all the same stuff.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thanks again. And this will not be the last time you'll be on here. I think there's plenty more to talk about. And I appreciate you as a colleague and friend. And thanks again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.